Jeremy Hunt.
Speaker, can I salute the tone of the Prime Minister's very difficult, sombre address to the nation on Monday night. I know that heroic efforts are happening to ramp up the amount of testing. Could the Prime Minister give us some idea as to when we will be able to get back to routine testing in the community, as happens in Korea and Germany and other countries? And should we not now introduce weekly tests for NHS staff, so we can remove from them the fear that they might be infecting their own patients?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can tell the House that both on antibody testing and on antigen testing, we are making huge progress. We're buying millions of antibody tests to show whether or not you've had the disease. And on his point that has been raised several times about how soon can we get NHS staff and other public sector workers tested in advance to see whether they currently have the disease, the answer to that is as soon as we possibly can.
Newland. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thousands of jobs in my constituency and nearly 1 million across the UK rely on the aviation industry for work, from pilots to baggage handlers and cabin crew to security staff and many more. The aviation industry is vital now and will be crucial when we come out of this dreadful coronavirus situation. The Chancellor and the Transport Secretary committed to a bespoke support package, but yesterday he wrote to industry to renege on that commitment. Can the Prime Minister tell the industry why his government have washed its hands of it?
I can tell the Honourable Gentleman we have certainly not washed our hands of any sector of UK business or industry. We're in regular contact with the aviation sector, doing everything that we can to help, and already that sector and others have schemes such as Time to Pay and many other loan support schemes already available. But I can assure him, Mr. Speaker, that there are other contacts going on as we speak.
We're going to now start the second part of Prime Minister's questions. I'm going to open with Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and again thank you for making the arrangements that you have today so that more colleagues can come into the chamber. It is a little odd, however, that we're having to have a double session of Prime Minister's question time to question the Prime Minister when he himself should have volunteered to come here and make a statement at some length on the subject rather than just doing it through press conferences and television addresses. This House is the place where the government should be held to account. Construction sites, Mr. Speaker, are still operating, still working on non-emergency work, despite the new rules. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster said yesterday that sites will continue to stay open. We heard this morning on the radio a call from a self-employed construction worker who said that he had contracted coronavirus, he was suffering from it, he knew he had got it, but had no other option but to get on the London Tube and go onto a site to work, obviously putting himself at greater risk and putting all other passengers and all other workers on that site at risk. Why was he doing it? Because his site had not been closed down. He had no other source of income to feed his family. So he's going to work, making all of us more at risk as a result. So can the Prime Minister be absolutely clear and give unequivocal guidance now that construction work on non-emergency work should stop now?
Mr. Speaker, everybody should work at home unless they must go to work, and every business that can, unless they have no alternative, they cannot do that work from home. If a business is continuing, a construction company is continuing, then clearly they should do so in accordance with the guidance of Public Health England, and they have a duty of care to their employees. But overwhelmingly what we are saying to the people of this country is that unless you need to leave the house to take exercise, for medical reasons, or to buy essential supplies, you should stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Obviously, people should stay at home and protect others. But if they have no other source of income, then these very difficult, very personal choices are going to be made, and as a result, we're all put at greater risk as a result of it. The self-employed are having to choose whether they go to work or stay at home or face losing their entire livelihood, relying instead on an overstretched welfare system which could pay as little as £94 per week. One self-employed person said they need to pay for baby food, rent, council tax and insurance for the car they use for work. Faced with the decision to feed your family and pay your bills or stay at home and not get paid, why is it taking the Prime Minister so long to guarantee income for all self-employed workers? There are millions of them. Our economy has changed.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are making absolutely clear to everybody in this country that they should stay at home and save lives. But when it comes to the self-employed and the particular pressures that he raises, I think I've now said several times already in this chamber in answer to other honourable members that we are shortly bringing forward a package, and I think that he would recognise that the steps that the government has taken to provide support for workers, for employees in this country are quite exceptional and unprecedented, and they were warmly welcomed, I may say, by the trades unions themselves.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Speaker, I'm asking questions about the self-employed and those on 0 hours contract and those with no recourse to public funds who have no support. They are in a very difficult situation, and he should understand that there are many of our constituents, for every member of this House, our constituents lead a hand-to-mouth existence. A few days' pay lost is catastrophic for them. And time again, government ministers have told us that workers affected by the crisis could get help via universal credit. Last night, there were queues of over 110,000 people trying to get onto the DWP system in order to register to apply for universal credit. Will the Prime Minister now put extra resources and funding to boost the DWP capacity and relax the often quite draconian requirements on people claiming, so that money gets where it's needed quickly to those people who've got to feed the kids, got to pay the rent, got to survive somehow?
Mr. Speaker, he's perfectly right, and that's why we've increased the funding for universal credit so that it goes up by £1,000 a year. That will benefit 4 million of the most vulnerable households in the country. And overall, we're putting another £7 billion into the welfare system altogether. And as I say, we will be bringing forward a package for the self-employed. But what we are not doing, and this is fully in accordance with the scientific and medical advice, what we are not doing is closing down the whole UK economy. And you will understand the reasons for that.
Jeremy Corbyn.
We're not asking for the entire UK economy to be closed down. We obviously want people to be safe, but clearly things have to go on. My question was about the DWP resources, which the Prime Minister didn't answer. Well, well, it wasn't an answer that was satisfactory to me. One of his colleagues is claiming it was a yes. I'll take that. So that means more staff now for the DWP, quickly, so we don't have 110,000 people waiting. Yeah, I haven't finished yet. Because my question is, Mr. Speaker, while he's about it, and this will give him time to think of the answer, can he... This is not a time for levity. The statutory sick pay level of £94.25 a week, which the Health Secretary admitted he couldn't live on, and despite promising he would ensure workers get the support they need, we've still not seen action on that. So unless we increase statutory sick pay and give protection and access to benefits for those on 0 hours contracts, then the dangers that we're all aware of people going into work or trying to work when they shouldn't is going to continue. We do need very urgent action on this.
Mr. Speaker, he's absolutely right. This is not a time for levity. It's a time for serious action and a serious response to the crisis. And that's what he's seen from this government. And that's why from day one we insisted that statutory sick pay should be payable from day one. That's why we've advanced universal credit. And just to repeat the answer I gave a moment ago, Mr. Speaker, we've increased universal credit by £1,000 a year. That will benefit 4 million people of the poorest families in the country. And yes, we do want to see... I pay tribute, by the way, amongst the many fantastic workers in this country, not just in the NHS, not just in social care, but of course in the teaching profession. But but in the DWP itself, they're doing an incredible job. They're facing huge new demands. They're doing an outstanding job, and yes, we will support them. And that's why we're putting another £7 billion, as I said just now, Mr. Speaker, into our welfare system.
I don't want to appear totally negative, Mr. Speaker, but it would be better if the whole place had been better staffed in the first place. But I'll take it for what the Prime Minister said, that there's going to be an increase in DWP staff in order that people can access universal credit more quickly. Mr. Speaker, it's quite right that Parliament is virtually closed today, and it's right that the Prime Minister and Cabinet Ministers continue to deliver daily public information sessions, and that is absolutely correct. However, I understand it's going to be possibly some time before the House meets again, and there has to be scrutiny of what governments do. That is what Parliament is for. That is what oppositions exist for. And so I'd be grateful if the Prime Minister could indicate how, over the weeks until Parliament opens again, he's going to put himself open to some form of scrutiny, electronic, whatever it happens to be, so that Parliament can hold government to account because of the levels of stress and concern of all the constituents that we represent.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Gentleman is entirely correct. I think the way we've tried to handle this crisis is to be as open and transparent as we possibly can with all our working, all our thinking, and I will work with you, if I may, Mr. Speaker, about how we can make sure that Parliament is also kept informed throughout the recess.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All I can say to the Prime Minister on this is, please make sure you make yourself available for scrutiny by this House and by everybody else, because we represent people who are desperately worried about their health, about their economic well-being, and if you're living in a small flat and you're told to isolate and you have a large family and a large number of children, the levels of stress are going to be huge. The levels of stress throughout our society are huge. It's up to all of us to do what we can to reduce those levels of stress and obviously bring this whole situation to a conclusion as quickly as we can. So we need clarity, not confusion. We need delivery, not dither. This crisis shows us, Mr. Speaker, how deeply we depend on each other. We'll only come through this as a society through a huge collective effort. At a time of crisis, no one is an island. No one is self-made. The well-being of the wealthiest corporate chief executive officer depends on the outsourced worker cleaning their office. At times like this, Mr. Speaker, we have to recognise the value of each other and the strength of a society that cares for each other and cares for all.
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I really want to do nothing else except to associate myself fully with the closing words of the Leader of the Opposition. And I think that what this country is doing now is utterly extraordinary. We are coming together as a nation in a way that I've not seen in my lifetime to help to defeat a disease and to help save the lives of many thousands of our fellow citizens. And we all understand that that will involve a sacrifice. But we're gladly making that sacrifice. And the most important point I can perhaps make to the House today is that that sacrifice is inevitable and it is necessary. But the more we follow the advice of the government, the more strictly we obey the measures that we have put in place, then the swifter and more surely this country will come back from the current crisis, the better we will recover. And so I just repeat my message in case the Right Honourable Gentleman would like to hear it one more time. The best thing we can do is stay at home, protect our NHS and save many thousands of lives.
Speaker, I echo the words of my right honourable friend. The current position on London transport is that the services have been severely curtailed. In fact, the journeys from his constituency into central London now are every 15 minutes as opposed to every 5 minutes. The result of that is huge packed trains with people who potentially are infecting other people.
Clearly, some of those people are being selfish. What advice does my right honourable friend have for his successor of Mayor of London in resolving this particular problem on London transport?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Mayor of London, I can assure him, I understand very well the job that the current mayor is doing, and my own view is that we should be able to run a better tube system at the moment. We should be able to get more tubes on the line. But we will do whatever we can. We will do whatever we. I do not wish in any way to cast aspersions on what is going on at TfL at the moment, because it is an outstanding organisation. What we will do is give the mayor every support and help that we can to help him through what seem to me to be his present logistical difficulties.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As of Monday, over 3,300 inquiries have been made in Scotland about NHS staff seeking to return to work in order to help us defeat the coronavirus. These people, and all those already working tirelessly within our NHS, are our heroes. Every last one of them, from consultants to cleaners, from carers to nurses, from drivers to maintenance workers, from GPs to paramedics, they are performing vital work to save the lives of others. When this crisis is over, we in this House will need to find some way to honour those amazing heroes. But there is one way that the public can honour and support our NHS staff now, and that is by staying at home. Staying at home and adhering to social distancing will save lives, protect our health and social care services, and begin to flatten the curve. We can avoid unnecessary deaths, but only if we all act together. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that we owe it to everyone in our NHS and to those willing to return for non-essential workers to stay at home?
Can I congratulate the right honourable gentleman for the splendid way in which he expressed himself just now, and I think that message deserves to be heard loud and clear across the whole UK.
Ian Blackford.
Well, can I thank the Prime Minister for what he has just said? Many members in this House will have had constituents contacting in recent days around evictions. Will the Prime Minister join me in praising Scotland's Community Secretary, Aileen Campbell, who has announced the Scottish Government's intention to use the emergency powers granted by the coronavirus bill to protect people from losing their homes? The Scottish Government's plan to impose a 6-month ban on evictions from private and social rented accommodation are as welcome as they are necessary. And will the Prime Minister also join me in sending a message out from this House that in times like this, we need a truly loving and compassionate society? No one, Mr. Speaker, should be facing the threat of evictions at a time of national emergency. Will the Prime Minister send out that message today?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker. I want to repeat what we're doing and the sense and the thrust of it. It's not just supporting LHA, putting £1 billion more back into supporting the rented sector through local housing allowance, but also stopping no-fault evictions. Now, the differences between 3 months and 6 months, what I can tell the right honourable gentleman is we will certainly keep that protection under review.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank Broxbourne Borough Council, particularly the leader and the Chief Executive and all its staff for the brilliant work they're doing, coordinating aid and support across my borough. Fantastic people working with a range of heroes. Prime Minister, there is an army of black cab drivers in and around London itching to get involved like the Spitfires in 1940. Prime Minister, can we find a way, if we need to get doctors and nurses safely across London, to use these black cab drivers, not on the meter, but perhaps on a contracted basis?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend makes a superb point, and indeed that has already been raised in our considerations. The black cab drivers are a fantastic service. They're an unsung service, and I believe that they can certainly rise to this challenge.
Hilary Benn.
Much indeed, Mr. Speaker. We've already heard about the huge increase in applications for universal credit, and whatever measures the Chancellor comes forward with to help the self-employed will take time to implement. What is the government's plan to help people with no job and no income and no savings in circumstances where they don't have any money at all to buy food. What will the government do to make sure that no family goes hungry?
Hear, hear, hear.
Well, we've already increased universal credit, but what we are doing immediately, Mr. Speaker, to help get cash to the poorest and neediest is to give an immediate grant of 500 million to local councils, and there will be more to come.
Morning, I've been talking to the Solent LEP about the future plans for Waterlooville, my constituency. They are already planning for our recovery after this pandemic. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that this is the opportunity to plan for the future, make sure that we can rebuild a strong economy and become more community-minded than ever before?
I do believe that this country will emerge better and stronger from this experience, and I can certainly tell my honourable friend that a great deal of thought is being given now to the lessons we need to learn from this crisis and how we can turn them to the advantage of the British people in the future.
Is the Prime Minister aware that people are being evicted now, this week, as a result of losing their income, including all of those people who are being turfed out of low-cost hotels where they were being housed either in their own right or by the local authority? Is he aware that all his emergency legislation will do is defer evictions for 2.5 months, storing up a problem further down the line? Can he tell us now what he is going to do to fulfil his government's commitment in full that nobody will lose their home as a result of this crisis?
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, she's totally right to raise. Of course, the bill comes into force, I believe, later today, or as soon as their lordships have finished with it. But as I said in answer to the leader of the SNP, we will keep the 3 month. It is 3 months, not 2.5 months. The 3 month period under review.
Neil Parish.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like so many colleagues, my constituency has many self-employed. Farming, food and food production is very much self-employed businesses. Can we be assured that it won't be bureaucracy and the difficulty of setting up a system that stops that help getting to the self-employed, because it's absolutely essential we cut through the bureaucracy to make it work?
That is indeed the issue, Mr. Speaker. The difficulty is not devising the schemes. We can devise the schemes. The difficulty is getting the cash to the people who need it in a timely way. And anybody who has worked on any of these projects will know that that is the real issue, Mr. Speaker.
Atherson.
Mr. Speaker, some firms such as Sports Direct or Wetherspoons have shamed themselves by bullying their staff into work. Other businesses are trying to do the right thing but are being let down by their insurance companies, such as events, sporting and conference companies in my constituency. Will the government give a clear direction now that no large events involving large numbers of people should be taking place any time in the near future, and insurance companies need to get their act together?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the instructions could not be clearer. The enforcement is there, and it is going to be applied, and the message should go out not only to those companies but to the insurers as well.
Anthony Mangle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister and his team for everything they've done so far, and can I associate my words with the member for Tiverton and Honiton about the need to support rural and coastal communities? And with that in mind, what further support might we be able to expect regarding fishermen who are sitting on the line?
Mr. Speaker, he is absolutely right, and he and I have seen the wonderful work that's done by the fishing community in his constituency, and they will receive all sorts of benefits, not least, of course, our ability in due time to take back control of the plenteous resources off the UK coast.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I spoke with a constituent who suffers from a debilitating rheumatic autoimmune disease, and symptoms of her condition are similar to that of coronavirus. She's concerned that she won't be included in those to be shielded, even though she's clearly at risk, and she's concerned that she's going to end up needing emergency medical help as she takes different medications. Can the Prime Minister confirm that the Government is working with the devolved administrations to ensure that the shielding guidance is consistent across the UK?
Minister. Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker. We're trying to make shielding guidance as consistent as we possibly can, but in her particular case, can I perhaps advise her to get in touch directly with us, and we'll make sure that she's included.
Ruth Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nottinghamshire Police are asking local employers to give paid leave to special constables to allow them to help during this crisis. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that every business should be playing its part and that all special constables should be able to report for duty?
Yeah.
Prime Minister.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker, and I should have added the police and specials, everybody who serves in our incredible police force for what they do, and they should certainly be added to the roll of honour.
John Speller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tens of thousands of our constituents are stranded abroad. At the same time, thousands of planes and pilots are sitting idle. Ministry of Defence have unparalleled experience in chartering planes and organising flights. What they need, Prime Minister, is your instruction to do that. So when you go back to Downing Street, will you get onto the Ministry of Defence, tell them to get the airlift started and bring our people home?
Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we certainly, though not every country in the world necessarily welcomes a grey tailfin, as it were, but we will make sure we are working with. Most of them do, I should say. But charters we are certainly commissioning right now, and there is a massive repatriation effort going on.
Richard Holden.
Mr. Speaker, can I put on record the gratitude of my constituents to the leadership that has been shown by both the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary during this very difficult time for the whole country. Coronavirus is showing our NHS at its best, including doctors, nurses and support staff in my North West Durham constituency, but it's also showing the strain in some parts of our NHS, including worn-out parts of the NHS estate. After the coronavirus pandemic outbreak has passed, will he and the Health Secretary work with me to look at delivering a new community hospital to replace the aged one at Shotley Bridge in my constituency?
Mr. Speaker, the short answer to that question is yes. The long answer is this government is in no way undimmed in its ambition to continue record investments in our NHS and build 40 new hospitals, Mr. Speaker.
Stuart C. MacDonald.
To protect us all from coronavirus, we need to protect the most marginalised, and that includes asylum seekers, those whose asylum claims have been refused, and all who are prohibited from having access to public funds by Home Office rules. So will the Prime Minister encourage the Home Office to urgently and radically reform its policies so that everybody can access the support and accommodation they need to get through this crisis?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this country will look after all the most vulnerable in society in the way that we always have, and the groups that he mentions will certainly receive the Home Office funding that they need and deserve.
Tom Hunt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The police will play a role in policing the social distancing guidelines outlined earlier this week. This will put an extra pressure on limited police resources, and my concern is that certain criminal elements might look to exploit this moment of national emergency to push their own insidious agenda. Will the Prime Minister promise me and my constituents that we will come down like a ton of bricks on those such individuals?
Prime Minister.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker. The early signs are that criminal activity is not up, is in fact down at the moment, but we will come down like a ton of bricks on anybody who seeks to exploit the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The people of Newcastle are desperately trying to do the right thing, although my inbox tells me that they are angry, confused, running out of money, isolated and stranded in some cases. However, not all businesses are doing the right thing, and I am particularly thinking of Mike Ashley forcing workers into empty Sports Direct shops. The Prime Minister said that businesses should stand with their staff. What is his message to those who don't?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the advice to the gentleman, the instructions of the gentleman in question, and indeed every business, is to follow what the government has said, to obey the rules, or to expect the consequences. And that is the best way to look after not just their employees, but their businesses as well.
Craig Williams.
Can I welcome the Prime Minister's approach with devolution? Wales has two governments, and his mature and the Welsh Government's approach has meant we've delivered fast legislation and efficient help. But any divergence on policy or communication causes anxiety for my constituents. The Secretary of State for Health announced volunteering. Sadly, Welsh volunteers can't take place in that scheme, although we're cross-border. Will he get on the phone to the Welsh Government and say, let's work together?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I must say that in general, the four nations of our United Kingdom have been working very, very well together, but we will get on to the Welsh Government this afternoon on the issue that he addresses.
Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Bristol, we're desperately trying to replace free school meals for children with home provision and other provision, but there's been real problems with the supply chain. How can we make sure that those providing those meals, including Andy Street at Feeding Bristol, I really want to pay tribute to, can get hold of the food that they need so that kids can get good, healthy food while they're at home?
Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I thank her. She's given me an opportunity to say once again that it is our schools, our teachers, everybody who works in the schools who are dealing with an incredibly difficult situation, looking after the pupils of key workers, helping to keep our country going at a very difficult time, and the administration of free school meals, supporting kids who need free school meals, is an absolute top priority of ours. We are working at the moment on a voucher scheme.
Right.
Trying to summarise an MP's inbox right now is not easy, but mine would say self-employed, please help us, and online delivery slots, which ones would they be? I trust the Prime Minister's going to deliver on the first. We've covered it a lot today, but on the latter, what can he realistically, given the demand, what can he realistically do?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we've changed the regulations so that supermarkets have got much more freedom in their delivery hours, and obviously one of the things we want to do is to make sure that we support people to help in this, what is, after all, at the moment, an expanding sector of the employment market, and we don't want to be putting up any barriers to online delivery at all.
Can I just say and wish the Leader of the Opposition well on his final question? And can I say to the Prime Minister, you have the wishes of everyone to make sure this country gets through this. Yeah. We now come to the ministerial statements. The Lord President of the Council, Leader of the House of Commons, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on the business. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, the business for the week commencing the 20th of April will include Monday the 20th of April, the House will not be sitting. Tuesday the 21st of April, second reading of the Immigration and Social Security Coordination EU Withdrawal Bill. Wednesday the 22nd of April, second reading of the Finance Bill, followed by motion relating to the membership of the Liaison Committee, followed by motion relating to the membership of the Scottish Affairs Committee. Thursday the 23rd of April, debate on a motion on errors in payments made to victims of the Equitable Life scandal, followed by debate on a motion on human rights in Kashmir. The subjects for these debates were determined by the Backbench Business Committee. Friday the 24th of April, private members' bills. The provisional business for the week commencing the 27th of April will include Monday the 27th of April, consideration in committee of the Finance Bill, day 1. Tuesday the 28th of April, continuation of consideration in committee of the Finance Bill, day 2. Wednesday the 29th of April, Opposition Day, 8th allotted day, there will be a debate on a motion in the name of the Scottish National Party. Thursday the 30th of April, business to be determined by the Backbench Business Committee. Friday the 1st of May, will appreciate that I am announcing business as if this were business as usual. I am grateful to parliamentarians and parliamentary staff for coming together to support the completion of emergency legislation essential to fight against COVID-19, including the Contingencies Fund Bill that will allow expenditure of £260 billion on account. Once the Coronavirus Bill and the Contingencies Fund Bill receive royal assent, and subject to the House's agreement, Parliament will rise for the Easter recess later today. It is obviously important that Parliament is able to sit after the recess. Further discussions will therefore continue within government, with the parliamentary authorities and with members to ensure Parliament operates safely for all those who work here. The legislature must be able to continue its vital democratic functions of conducting scrutiny, authorising spending and making laws, including the Finance Bill. Whilst my business statement is made with the aim of bringing the House back as normal on the 21st of April, we will continue to keep the situation under review in line with medical advice, and I will make further announcements about the plans for business when we return as necessary.
Valerie Vars.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Leader of the House for his statement. Can I start by wishing Prince Charles a speedy recovery? I know he's tested positive for coronavirus, and our gracious sovereign, who's also in self-isolation. It was good that Prince Charles was able to have a test. A lot of our frontline staff don't have that test. I wonder if the leader could ensure that, and I know the Prime Minister said earlier he wants to protect the NHS, they need protecting. They deserve our gratitude. Could he do all he can to ensure that tests are available for them? He will know that the front bench of our party and other opposition parties are working constructively together, and I hope that will continue while we go into recess. Many of the fiscal measures have come through because our constituents have contacted us to ensure that we put their cases forward. Some of them are absolutely desperate. I am slightly concerned about his 21st of April caveat, and I know he will do all he can to ensure that Parliament returns on the 21st. We know that we are able to operate, albeit with a skeleton staff. Can I just ask him about voting, because that's another area that honourable members have concerns about. We need to hold the government to account. He's the first, I'm sure, to agree. We found new ways of voting during the Brexit debate, so I wonder if those negotiations could continue through the usual channels, because clearly that the House and voting arrangements, it has to reflect the wishes of the House. I've raised with him the possibility of questions. We know that questions aren't answered during recess, and in the light of your statement, Mr. Speaker, there is no way that the staff currently the civil service can cope with 60 questions at a time. We don't ask for that, but given this is unusual at times, whether it's through questions or perhaps an MP's hotline, more MP's hotlines may be the way forward, but if he could possibly look at the way that urgent questions can be answered. Could I just ask him about the Boundary Commission report, which was published as a written statement yesterday? That is going to be decided by order in council. Now, he and I both know that it's not a matter for the gracious sovereign to be involved in a political decision. I wonder if he could ensure that any oral statement comes back to the House so that the House can decide on that. I'm tempted to say I've received an email from, but I want to pay tribute to the Leader of the Opposition and thank him for all his work, and particularly his family and his staff. They've worked very hard. But he must have done something right, Mr. Speaker, because he's seen off 2 Prime Ministers. But finally, I want to thank everyone here, the staff who have enabled us to carry on working here with a reduced staff, to carry on business. And I want to wish every single honourable and right honourable member and their families, I hope they're going to be healthy and safe.
Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Lady rightly sends the House's good wishes to the Prince of Wales. God bless the Prince of Wales. And indeed to the Queen. We will be coming back on the 21st of April, which is, of course, Her Majesty's actual rather than official birthday. So let us hope that affairs are in a better state by then. The Right Honourable Lady referred to tests, and I would reiterate what my Right Honourable friend the Prime Minister was saying earlier. There is an absolute determination to increase testing as fast as possible. That is of great importance, and it is being worked on. I am grateful, and the government is extremely grateful, for the cooperation from opposition parties. That when opposition parties cooperate with the government, this is not always seen, because what they achieve is done behind the scenes. But the opposition parties have contributed considerably to the coronavirus bill and to ensuring its passage through this House, and I would like to thank them for a model way of working in very difficult times. The voting issue, Mr. Speaker, you came up with proposals for how we would vote had we voted this week, which I think were sensible. But yes, there is more work to be done, and we will have to discuss working practices when we get back, depending on how affairs look on the 21st of April or shortly before. The Right Honourable Lady refers to the written statement on the Boundary Commission. When we get back, there will be opportunities for normal scrutiny once we are back fully operational. And I'm delighted to see that the Leader of the Opposition is back in his place, so I too may pay tribute to him. I perhaps have a particular admiration for him, which may surprise him, because when I was first elected to Parliament, it already has, he says, but when I was first elected to Parliament, there was a distinguished figure who sat at the far end of the opposition benches, was in Parliament the whole time, spoke very regularly, and was a very, very committed parliamentarian. And then he became leader of his party. As a new MP, I sat on the far side of my own benches, observing affairs, and though I do not have the level of ambition of the honourable gentleman, I too ended up on the front benches. So it seems that those corners are good ones to sit in. But there is a principled point behind this, if I may add, Mr. Speaker, that those of us who sit in those far reaches of the House are often very independent-minded and have a great commitment to public service, which the right honourable gentleman unquestionably has, and strong principles about how we think this country may be better governed. It is no surprise to anybody that the principles held by the right honourable gentleman and by me are different, but they are both committed to ensuring the good government of this country. And I think the model he has shown of how a backbench member may make an enormous contribution over many years and may then lead his party with distinction is one that should be remembered. Principles in politics are fundamental to how we do what we do and how we achieve it. So this is a most sincere tribute to the right honourable gentleman, and I note from what he said to the Prime Minister earlier that this is not retirement, it is merely moving to a different part of the front bench in a few weeks' time. I reiterate the right honourable lady's thanks. Well, I understand that's what's been asked for, and ask and it shall be given, seek and you shall find. The right honourable lady is absolutely right to pay tribute to all the people who have kept the House operating, who have done a really terrific job. I think the security teams, the doorkeepers, and as the Leader of the Opposition said, the cleaners have really worked marvellously well to ensure we are operating, and of course the clerks, and the flexibility that is being shown in ensuring that scrutiny may continue via select committees. And finally, the Right Honourable Lady wished everybody good health. It is very interesting. We always ask people how they are, as a normal courtesy, wandering about our daily lives. At the moment when we make this inquiry, we really mean it, and so I too wish everybody good health.
Teresa Villiers, but just before, I expect to run this to about 1:30, Teresa.
I completely understand the need to send Parliament off for the recess early, but there are, of course, huge questions which are yet to be resolved. Whether it's ensuring that all NHS and social care workers have access to the highest quality PPE consistent with international standards, the massive increase in testing that we need and we've been promised, and of course the fact that I have constituents and many others do stranded around the world, including in places like Peru. So can I urge the Leader of the House to make sure that the government lives up to all of its promises on all of those matters, to keep our NHS and social care workers safe and to bring home those who are stranded abroad at this very difficult time?
Mr. Speaker, those matters have of course been raised with the Prime Minister as well, and it is important to note that in answer to a request from the Shadow Leader, we are going to liaising with other government departments to ensure that we have hotlines for members to call, which may speed up the process of holding the government to account.
Patrick Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on these benches, of course, we send our best wishes to the Duke of Rothesay as he recovers from the coronavirus. I think we warmly welcome the decision that the House will close for its recess today. It's important that we set an example. We've been doing that in how we sit in the chamber. It's important that we are able now to return to our constituencies and, like everyone else, social distance, stay at home and save lives. But I want to add on behalf of the SNP, especially the small number of us that have been here this week, our immense gratitude to all the staff of the House, the clerks, the security staff, the cleaners, the catering staff. It's been a trying time for all of them, and none of us would be able to do our job without their support. Absolutely. I think he's right that the business listed for the week of the 21st of April must be extremely provisional, and if Parliament is to be brought back and the crisis is continuing, it has to be done in a way that respects whatever guidance is still in force around social distancing. As I said to him earlier in the week, it may well be the case that anyone that comes to London from constituencies outside of the metropolitan area would have to self-isolate when they went back to their constituencies if the epicentre is continuing here. So we have to bear those logistics in mind. And I'd be happy to share with them an absolutely first-class research briefing that the library compiled about practices in other parliaments elsewhere in the world and how they're dealing with this, and we should thank the library service for their work in these times as well. I welcome the indication of that there will be an opportunity to convene the Scottish Affairs Committee and Liaison Committee, and an indication of an SNP opposition day as soon as time realistically allows. And finally, I would echo the calls of the Honourable Lady around parliamentary questions. I wonder in particular if members who have tabled named day questions that would have been answered when the House was sitting tomorrow, Friday, Monday or Tuesday might still have those questions answered, and then that some kind of provision is thought about if we are into an extended period of closure beyond that. Thank you.
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the Duke of Rothesay and the Lord of the Isles will, I'm sure, appreciate the good wishes from the SNP. I appreciate his point on the guidance from the library. That is very useful, and the library is a wonderful resource that we have. And as regards to questions, it is important that the government is held to account, and I can assure the House we are looking at ways where questions may be continued. The only caveat that I would add is that ministers are exceptionally busy at the moment, and it is important that people are reasonable in what they ask for.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In these tough economic times for numbers of people, a number of our constituents will be tempted to take a payment holiday on their mortgage. Now, unfortunately, these holidays will not be paid holidays, they'll be unpaid holidays, and the reality is that the interest on those mortgages will continue to accrue and will need to be paid when things turn to normal. The one area which does not seem to be offering any payment holidays whatsoever are our credit card companies, which are already charging exorbitant interest charges anyway, particularly when the Bank of England has slashed interest rates. So can my right honourable friend arrange for the Treasury to do something about this to prevent many of our constituents falling into terrible debt from which they may take years literally to recover?
Leader of the House.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is right that the usurious rates charged on credit cards can trap people into high levels of debt, as may the high overdraft fees, interest rates that have recently been introduced. And this is a serious matter, and the banks, I'm sure, are aware that the rest of the country is doing its best to help, and will note that they received a lot of help in 2008. There is a parable about this which I'm reminded of, but Mr. Speaker, time does not allow.
Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate, as I think we all do, that we shouldn't be meeting physically in this place. It's not the right thing to do, and I accept that the decision has been made that we should rise for recess early. But I'm really uncomfortable as a Member of Parliament receiving hundreds of emails all the time from constituents who are worried, as the Honourable Lady said, about a whole raft of different things that are as yet unanswered by this government, that I will not have the opportunity to ask a question and receive an answer over that recess period. And I wonder, in this modern age, you know, all of us are zooming left, right and centre at the moment with all our constituents, many people, all at the same time. It's perfectly possible. Surely it must be possible for us to fulfil our democratic function at this time of great crisis and put questions to the government and get answers back.
Mr. Speaker, I will make the hotline numbers available for each department as soon as we have them. We've got most of them already. The other thing to remind honourable and right honourable members about is that not every question to a ministry needs to go through a parliamentary question, that they answer to written inquiries, emailed inquiries as well. And if honourable right honourable members have any difficulties getting replies, please contact my office even during the recess, and I will do everything I can to help facilitate speedy answers.
Yes, Mark Pritchard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the House suggested that we'll be listening to the second reading of an immigration bill on the first day back, and with the indulgence of Mr. Speaker, there of course could be urgent questions or statements on that day about the coronavirus and subsequent updates, but those are often time limited. I just wonder whether the Leader of the House would consider us having a day or 2 days to discuss many of the issues raised on both sides of the House in a general debate or something similar on coronavirus and the immigration bill being taken perhaps later.
Leader of the House.
Mr. Speaker, I think the message from the statement that I have made is that there is important and urgent business for Parliament to carry out, and that therefore we need to be back to do that. That will of course include discussing the consequences and the continuation of action needed because of the coronavirus.
Tan Singh Desi.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, dozens of constituents have contacted me because they have been stranded abroad. They feel abandoned, let down by the slow pace of action by the government in terms of bringing them back home, with many now fast running out of medicine. They, as foreigners, within the lockdown within those countries, are feeling stigmatised because they, as foreigners, are being accused of having imported the virus into that country. And they are being forced also, Mr. Speaker, to go into civil hospitals where the conditions are so dire that if they haven't had the virus till then, there is a high likelihood that they will then contract the virus. So can the Leader of the House assure me that there will be a ministerial statement or perhaps a debate after recess whereby we can go into detail of the actions taken by the Foreign Secretary so that we, as constituency MPs, can hold the Foreign Secretary to account?
Mr. Speaker, when this crisis has ended, there will be many processes that look at what has happened. But I would reiterate what the Prime Minister said not that long ago, that the government is making every possible effort to help people get home. I took up the points made at my previous business statement with the Foreign Secretary. The government is doing what it can in these difficult circumstances to help not only the honourable gentleman's constituents, but the country at large.
Richard Graham.
Mr. Speaker, I hope you'll allow me to ask the Leader of the House a question I would have asked the Prime Minister, which is that in these times of an expanding NHS and rapidly emptying car parks, there is a great opportunity for our car park operators to do the country a national service by offering some of their places free for NHS staff. And this includes station car parks, which are close to A&E hospitals. And while many of us are making good progress on this locally, it would be much easier if it was possible for the government to coordinate this so that every car park operator in the country reached the same agreement for this temporary crisis.
Leader of the House.
My honourable friend makes a very good point, and I will ensure that it is passed on.
Streeting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do understand the difficulties that we're in, but I will have to disrupt the consensus. I don't think it's the right thing for Parliament to go into recess early, and I'm worried at how long it will be until we return. And I hope the Leader of the House will guarantee that we will return on the date in April when we are due, because whether it's the concerns about the lack of testing for NHS staff, the fact we still don't have details on support for the self-employed, the fact the Health Secretary can't believe he could live on statutory sick pay of £94 a week, but we still expect people across the country to do that. There are so many issues that we need to discuss, notwithstanding we have just given the government unprecedented, concentrated power, unchecked until this House returns. So can the Leader of the House assure us we will return, and when we return, make sure that other people not here are able to participate electronically?
Mr. Speaker, it is of the greatest importance that Parliament is here to hold the government to account. We are rising 2 days early, effectively 2.5 days early. The business for next week was not urgent business, but his point is extremely well made, and one with which I have a great deal of sympathy.
Catherine West.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the House has spoken about hotlines which are available for MPs to use, but is he aware that there's over 700,000 people waiting in a queue for the DWP to assess them for universal credit due to their being laid off because of the insecure nature of their work? Could the Leader of the House tell us what kind of waiting time there is currently for members when they contact the DWP on behalf of that huge number of constituents who are in desperate financial need?
Leader of the House.
I understand there's about half an hour waiting time for contacting the hotlines at the moment, but the DWP has faced the most enormous increase in volume. It is receiving a multiple every day of what it normally receives in a week in terms of inquiries, and I think the work the DWP is doing to help people is really remarkable and deserves praise rather than criticism.
David Linden.
Mr Speaker, I note what the Leader of the House said about accessing hotlines for members of Parliament, but with the greatest respect, it's not civil servants that should be answering our questions, it's ministers. So if it was possible last night for journalists to be able to question the Health Secretary by video link, why is it not possible for us?
Mr Speaker, if honourable members send emails to ministers, ministers routinely reply, and we do hold ministers to account by correspondence.
Greg Thomas.
I share the concerns of others in the House, Mr Speaker, about the inability to table questions over the recess, and more generally the reservations that my honourable friend for Ilford has expressed. And I give one example to illustrate that. The excellent trade union community has many members working in online retail. The government has made a decision that they should continue to work as they are a critical sector. Yet it is not clear what protections and guidance is available to employers and trade unions working in that sector about social distancing and the enforcing of them. The ability to ask a question about that would hopefully get a clear answer from the Minister and enable the sector to move forward in a positive way.
Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, the honourable gentleman has now asked that question, and I'll ensure it is passed to the relevant minister for answer.
Lord Russell-Moyle.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I have to agree with my honourable friend. I think that closing this place down early without putting sufficient measures of online debate and questions is foolhardy at best. Mr Speaker, we have a system of named day questions which already limits the number of questions you can ask, so that 60-question scenario can't happen. Will the Leader of the House liaise with the parliamentary authorities so named day questions can continue throughout this recess, so at least we can have questions in public, because then the question is only asked once rather than numerous ministerial correspondence?
Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, there's no limit on non-named day questions, so it's only on named day questions limit replies, and select committees will be able to carry on their work and will be able to do so remotely, so scrutiny is being continued with.
Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition was right to praise cleaners. My 90-year-old mother, Beryl, is a former cleaner, and when I first took her to Cardiff City Hall when I was first elected and showed her the Grand Marble Hall, her reaction was to say, imagine having to clean this. and I think we should all remember that in politics at every time. But these days, unlike in her day, most of those cleaners, or many of them, are self-employed. Not by choice, and neither are they very wealthy, unlike the kind of self-employed people the Chancellor was talking about yesterday. The Prime Minister said within a couple of days we'll have an answer. Does that mean that we will have an answer from the government for self-employed people on Friday?
Mr Speaker, first of all, may I wish the honourable gentleman's mother good health at the age of 90, and I hope she is staying at home and following all the advice, though sometimes persuading mothers to do what they're advised to do is not easy. Cleaners are very important. The Prime Minister said that an announcement would come out soon. I think that implied 48 hours. That would get us to Friday. So reading into what he said, I think the honourable gentleman's question answers itself.
Kerry McCarthy.
Speaker, can I just follow up on the point that was made about answers to named day questions? I tabled a question last week on behalf of the Cystic Fibrosis Trust asking what special provisions would be put in place to make sure that people would have priority access to hospital and also priority access to testing. I was told on Monday that the government wouldn't be able to answer in the time available. Does this mean that I'm not now going to get an answer till the end of April, or is there any way in which we can at least ensure those questions are carried over?
Mr Speaker, I must confess I would have a certain sympathy with the Health Department at the moment for not answering questions with its normal efficiency. I think we as members have to be reasonable on the matters of scrutiny that we are asking for, and I would suggest that the honourable lady writes into the department on this question.
Bill Esterson.
If construction workers can't afford to stay at home, they will go to work, and if the Prime Minister doesn't close construction sites, they will stay open. So will he pass on to the Prime Minister that he must make sure that every construction worker, whether self-employed or employed, and it is both, can afford to stay at home, and will he pass on the message that construction sites absolutely must close?
This matter obviously was raised during Prime Minister's questions. I would say that the advice from the government is very clear. If you cannot work from home, but can work observing social distancing, which is being about 6 feet away from people, which we are doing pretty well at doing, then it is safe to go on to work, into work, and that is an important part of the government's message. Stay at home, but if you can't stay at home, you have to work away from home, then observe social distancing.
Peter Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm extremely concerned at the implications of closing Parliament early. The irony will be lost on no one that builders across the river in Battersea are going about their business as normal with the sanction of government, and yet government is closing down Parliament and stopping our ability to scrutinise in the normal way. Normally, in times of crisis, Parliament is recalled. It isn't closed down. So, considering that he is doing something so extraordinary, shouldn't he also be announcing extraordinary new measures so that we remotely can hold government to account in this time?
Hear, hear.
In the House.
Mr. Speaker, Parliament is not being closed down. The date for returning has been set, which is the same date as was always planned. The business that we had in front of us was not pressing business. On Monday of next week, we were going to be discussing the relief of rates on public toilets. It was therefore reasonable to suspend these days because they were not essential business. However, we will come back on the 21st of April, we will deal with essential business, and members may continue to hold the government to account by correspondence, and select committees will be able to carry out inquiries.
Chair Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And tonight's rise of the House means that we will not have questions to the Secretary of State for Digital tomorrow. And yet, out of all the questions that remain, there are two key digital ones. Firstly, in terms of the provision for some kind of digital parliament in case we cannot come together again. And can I urge the Leader of the House to work with the House authorities on this in an open source way so that we can see the attempts that are being made and where it is going. But secondly, and most importantly, social distancing must be accompanied by a digital coming together, and yet our telecoms networks will be under unprecedented demand. So far, all we've had is vague assurances from operators which do not match my experience of designing and dimensioning networks or my constituents' experience. So can I urge him to give some kind of guarantee of digital access to everyone socially isolating and work with the sector to make sure that happens?
Leader of the House.
Mr. Speaker, can I assure the Honourable Lady that the Government and others will consider how Parliament can work differently if we need to in April and work out how that can be done. Whether the Chamber can be run on a digital basis or not is something that I would question. Though with regard to her second point, the Honourable Lady is absolutely right that there will be pressure on people who are supplying goods and services that are now suffering from excess demand. That is in the nature of what is currently happening, and there will be pressure on those businesses.
Point of order, Dean Russell.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, I am deeply saddened to report and share that my predecessor, the former MP for Watford, Lord Tristan Garrell-Jones, sadly passed away yesterday. His legacy in Watford is deeply cherished, as it is in this House, and he was hugely respected both across the constituency and I'm sure by all members and those of those in the Lords. His reputation is truly one any MP should aspire to, and I do on a daily basis. He will be deeply missed, and my thoughts, as I'm sure those of the whole House, but with his family on this difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to pay tribute on this point of order. Thank you.
Can I just say, obviously, a point of order, Chair, but it's quite right. We'll put it on the record, and all the thoughts of all members of this House, all sides, will come together, and we do wish his family our sincere thoughts and prayers at this time. Thank you. Oh, point of order, Kevin Jones.
Kevin Brennan, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, the Procedure Committee has still not been set up because there were objections to the proposal put forward by the Leader of the House to creating a new piece of prime ministerial patronage and putting in place someone rather than being elected by this House as the chair of the Procedures Committee. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, whether there's been any indication that that motion could be brought back by the Leader of the House at any stage without that chair of the, not the Procedure Committee, sorry, the Liaison Committee, without that position being included in the motion.
Well, to help, it's not for today. It's Wednesday, the Liaison Committee Chair. Yeah, that is not for today. I'm sure the Leader of the House, if he wishes to clarify it, to clear up any mess, or is he happy?
Mr. Speaker, I think it's clear that it is business put down for the 22nd. There will be a debate on the formation of the Liaison Committee and the Scottish Affairs Committee, two very important committees.
So it's not, don't need to worry for today. Right, we now come to the first Opposition Day motion on social cohesion and community.
No.
Sorry?
Finance, second one.
Oh, you pulled the first one, of course. We now come to the second Opposition Day motion on financial social emergency support package. Jeremy Corbyn to move.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much for accommodating the change that we wanted to make to the order paper today in order to make for a more efficient debate, but also to ensure that the Prime Minister's question time ran for the extra time that you put for it. In response to the member for Watford and what he just said, I join with him in paying tribute to the life of Tristan Garrell-Jones, who I knew very well when he was a Conservative MP, and he was one that had an enormous knowledge of Latin America and Central America, spoke very fluent Spanish, and he and I would often exchange pleasantries in Spanish in the tea room. And so my best regards to his family. Lo siento a la morio de Señor Garrell-Jones. Mr. Speaker, we're holding this debate today amidst a crisis unlike any other we've experienced in our lifetime, and I hope that the Leader of the House, to whom I thank very much for the kind remarks he made about me, understands that the importance is that in this crisis democracy is not closed down, but democracy is strengthened and enhanced, and it's the job of oppositions to hold the government to account. And I thank my friend the member for Walsall South for the very kind remarks she made in her role as Shadow Leader of the House and the work that she is doing there. This coronavirus outbreak will have a lasting impact on our economy and our society. Life is never going to be the same again. The immediate task of the opposition is to help arrest the spread of the coronavirus and support the public health efforts that are being made, whilst being constructively critical where it's necessary to do so, and to ensure there is an improved official response. And I thank all my colleagues for the questions they just put to the Leader of the House about how this House can continue operating as it should, even during a recess. The advice and instructions are absolutely crystal clear, so people know precisely what they should or should not do to limit or slow the spread of the virus. But there needs to be detailed guidance to employers and workers about which workplaces should close. Clear communication from the government is vital for everybody's safety. This crisis, Madam Deputy Speaker, is presently exposing the vulnerabilities in our economy and our society. Underfunded public services, insecure work, a threadbare social security system, they all carry a very heavy burden. But it's usually hidden from the public view. But it's been thrust into a brutal light by a public health emergency. It's also showing us just how dependent we are on each other, on the many ties of mutual aid woven together that make up the fabric of our society and our communities. We can come out of this crisis with that fabric strengthened if we value and support each other. And I pay tribute to all those fantastic people, many of them young people, who are volunteering now to help people going through stress and crisis. And indeed, I met a group last week who were leafleting in my constituency to ensure that everybody got some help if they needed it. So our first our first duty is actually just to say to all of them, thank you. Yes, of course I can.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for giving way, and would he agree with me that where there are some excellent local initiatives, the announcement in the last 2 days of the national initiative is also welcome, but that it would be great to have some coordination so that we can cut out any confusion about who should volunteer when and where?
I thank my friend for that intervention, and she's absolutely right, because there are lots and lots of very enthusiastic volunteers, and that's good, that's great. But it does need coordination, and it also needs protection, because we are dealing with assisting very vulnerable people, and therefore we've got to be quite clear that those people that are volunteering are responsible and are doing it for all of the right motives. And all the volunteer groups that I've been in touch with and met are very, very clear about this. They're very well organised, and they're very, very responsible in the way that they do it. And I thank them for it. And all those efforts will help us to overcome this. But it's also, I think, necessary to say thank you to those delivering essential public services, especially to our National Health Service staff who are on the front line, the medical professionals, healthcare workers, auxiliary staff, administrators, ambulance drivers, paramedics, the whole team in every health facility. They're already very stretched in normal times, and now they're coming under unimaginable pressure and stress, whilst at the same time they themselves are vulnerable to contracting coronavirus. And I think we should just acknowledge that and say thank you. We should also say thank you to the social care sector. Social care sector, so often unrecognised, so often ignored, almost always badly paid. They are caring for the most vulnerable people in our society. And as my friend, the member for Hove, was explaining earlier, the problems of contracting the virus in a home where people have not been tested only gets worse and worse the longer we delay on it. Of course.
Right honourable friend, I completely agree with his approach, and the fact that we should all be giving a socially distanced hug to these care workers and other precarious parts of the economy, in employment, in housing. Would you not agree with me that against all this background of the biggest crisis that we'll ever know, we do need a collective approach, and policies like nationalising the railways, providing an economic stimulus to kickstart our economy, free broadband actually don't look so outlandish after all?
Well, it wasn't so long ago I was making lengthy speeches about those subjects, and I'm quite prepared to hand a copy of our manifesto over to the government, because they are already being forced to implement a great deal of it because of the crisis and because of the deficiency in public services that we exposed during that election campaign. And so, Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, yes, of course, yeah.
Right honourable friend for giving way on a much more granular point, but referencing his point about care homes. A care home owner has been in touch with me saying that he is increasingly short-staffed because of infection among staff. Yet he is aware of staff from overseas who have the qualifications, who are unable to work, because the Home Office have yet not been able to move quickly enough to allow him to give them jobs and to sort out the sponsorship requirements. Could he encourage the Minister to get this issue looked at quickly by the Home Office? I will be writing to the Home Office, but it would be good to flag it now.
My friend makes a very strong point and a very good point on this, and this indeed has been raised by my friend the Shadow Home Secretary and others on many occasions, because it is absurd that we have highly skilled people in our society who are awaiting a letter from the Home Office before they're able to contribute to our society. We're talking care workers, we're talking doctors, we're talking social workers, we're talking all sorts of highly skilled people. They want to contribute to help us out. So I absolutely agree with what he said, and I strongly support the view that he's putting forward to the Home Secretary. I think we should also just pay a moment to say thank you to civil servants in the Department of Health and other departments are putting in incredibly long hours. I talk to people in my own local authority, local government workers, working really, really hard to try to make sure the community and the society is safe. And also to teachers teachers who are having to go into school to ensure there is some facilities and teaching available for the children of those that are vulnerable, rather essential care workers, as well as children who've got very special needs. And so let's value them and value the work that they do, and thank the National Education Union and the other teaching unions for the work that they've put in to ensuring this takes place. And also those that deliver stuff. Yes, delivery workers, delivery riders and delivery companies, and also our postal workers for what they do. And they've suspended their industrial action, their wholly justified, I may say, industrial action, in order to make sure that essential deliveries can carry on throughout this crisis. And I think we should say thank you to the Communication Workers Union and to them for all